Good afternoon, everyone. To begin with, can I get a quick show of hands of how many people here are mostly just on the construction end, like they just go out in the field, you inspect or maintain stormwater facilities and don't have much to do with policy or anything? Show of hands. Okay. We do have some examples and references, so hopefully the class won't be, totally for not for you. And so I'm going to take that to assume that the rest of the people in here have at least some hand in the policy aspect of how maintenance and inspection happens in the city. Like Jeff said, that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about. A lot of people think that, all I have to do is say that, if you're a private developer and it's on private property, you're responsible for handling maintenance, end of story. But you'll see as we look through some of these other jurisdictions, there were some more details and some more aspects involved than just saying it's your responsibility and we don't want anything to do with it. So we're going to go over those and kind of see how they can help your city and your inspection and maintenance program run a little bit smoother. We won't be talking really about any details on the maintenance steps or the inspection steps on individual BMPs. There were some example handouts up there, I believe, that had operation and maintenance inspection reports. That's a good source for you. We also have some other sources we'll be talking about. But really, to go through each one of those individually, we just don't have time in an hour and a half to get into enough detail to talk about all the things we would need to cover on those subjects. So also what I wanted to ask is how many in here know that their city is either already adopted or is in the process of adopting post-construction controls or BMPs in the city, allowing BMPs in the city? Okay, so a few of them. This is part of your MS4 permit. There's two different phases, phase 1 and phase 2 MS4 permits. Phase 1 permits are individual permits. So they're kind of based on the city. They're for the larger cities, they're your Dallases, your Fort Worths, Arlingtons. Right now, the focus areas for phase 1s are storm mapping, construction waste, and public outreach. But they do see that in the future, they're going to start trending towards the phase 2 permits. Those are actually a little bit more strict, and those are your cities under 100,000 right now. And they have 6 main aspects you need to cover. Illicit discharge, public education, public involvement, good housekeeping, and then those last 2 are really what iSWM covers, post-construction controls and construction site controls. So that's really what that boils down to is water quality, making sure you're doing something about water quality both during construction and after construction. So the current small MS4 permit or the phase 2 permit actually does have some specific language about operation and maintenance, or more specific than the rest of their language tends to be. So they do say that you need post-construction controls for 1 acre or more of your, for a site that's 1 acre or more, and that it can either be structural or non-structural. And then on that last bullet there, you'll see it says, ensure adequate long-term operation and maintenance of BMPs. So that's a little bit vague, but they did want to put that in there to make sure cities are focusing on maintenance and inspection, because as these start being, implemented in cities, it's new. It's new to a lot of maintenance people. It's new to a lot of developers. People aren't sure how to, incorporate these into their existing processes or systems. So it's something that needs to be focused on. The new draft small MS4 permit just came out. I'm not sure if anybody's had the chance to take a look at it, but they got even more specific on maintenance and inspection, and we believe it's because they realize that this is going to be a big issue, that this is something that needs a lot of attention. So they came out, and again, the post-construction controls requirements are pretty much the same. They say either structural or non-structural. That's pretty vague. But then for maintenance and inspection, they say we require the owner or operator to develop and implement a maintenance plan. So now they're saying, all right, we want a plan and it has to be documented. The maintenance plan must be filed in the real property records of the county. So that's actually what TCEQ has come out and said that they have to be documented, and they're even pointing out where they need to be documented. And then the permittee shall require operation and maintenance performed is documented and retained on site. So in addition to having that maintenance plan filed with the county, all the records that say that maintenance is being performed needs to be available on site for if the city wants to review it. Inspections are also covered under the new draft MS4 permit, and where the maintenance, they seem to be mostly trending towards having the developer or owner and operator responsible. Inspection is kind of more of the city's responsibility. They say permittees who operate level 4 small MS4s shall develop and implement an inspection program. So you need to have a program, you need to have inspection checklists and guidelines, and you need to have people to go out there inspecting. They do say that for small MS4s with limited enforcement, this requirement applies to the structural controls owned and operated by the city. So if you're smaller than a level 4, which the next slide I'll cover what constitutes a level 4, but if you're smaller than a level 4 MS4, then you're only responsible for the BMPs that are owned by the city. And then at the bottom there, permittee shall document its inspection findings in an inspection report. So basically you have those on site, you have those in your city, so if TCEQ ever comes knocking, you're able to provide those to them. Again, with the levels, level 1, this is kind of new with the draft MS4 permit. They've separated out the phase 2s into 4 different levels based on population. Level 4, where you're required to inspect all the BMPs, that's greater than 100,000. So level 3s, you have 40 to 100. Level 2 is 10 to 40, and level 1 is less than 10,000. So what is a post-construction control or post-construction BMP? They're the same things. Those are interchangeable, but they vary from a wide range of options to help treat water quality, essentially. Up here we have a few examples, and details on how to design these are all in the iSWM technical manual. But you have things like planter boxes, bioretention ponds, enhanced swales, infiltration trenches, organic filters, sand filters, and alum treatment systems. So you can see how these would vary from needing fairly limited maintenance and pretty easy to inspect to being pretty advanced. Things that you're going to need specific training on, and that it's not going to be kind of an everyday person who can go out and say that this system is working properly or that it's built correctly. iSWM, the criteria manual, does have a table that lists the implementation considerations for each BMP. Under these, they have the maintenance burden, and this is just kind of an estimate of how intense they think that the maintenance requirements are going to be for each BMP. They separate it out into low, moderate to high, and high. See, there's not a lot of green up there. And even the green that's up there, it can be disputable for some people. It's fairly subjective. Mostly the low maintenance ones are in the ponds regions, and then bioretention areas and enhanced swales. There could be things depending on like filter strips being moderate. That probably has mostly to do with just the mowing requirements. There's a lot of mowing on that. So while it might not be expensive, it would be frequent. So isn't this the developer or owner's problem? Why should a city put any more effort into just saying, hey, if you own a BMP on your site, it's your job to take care of it? There are a few other aspects to this that we're going to go over, but then there are some instances outside of that where cities are going to need to know how to maintain and inspect these things themselves. There's HOAs. A lot of times, you have it in your contract that the HOA is going to take care of any detention or things like that on site, but a lot of times we see that not happening. HOAs trade ownership quite a bit, or they trade leadership, and they come back and say, hey, we don't have the money to do this. Why isn't the city doing this for us? And it can become a problem. Public areas and runoff, we are seeing that in the new draft permit, they are going to start requiring that cities put these BMPs up for their own sites. So if you have a city-owned facility, you are going to have to start installing these BMPs and maintaining them. And then how do you ensure long-term operation and maintenance is being performed? That was one of the tick marks on the small MS4, even the current permit, is ensure long-term operation and maintenance. Well, how can you do that if really you're putting all the onus on the owner and developer and you're not going out there and taking a look at it for yourself? So effects on city staff. Developing a good maintenance and inspection program is going to bring a lot of people in on, just writing the language and then also going out there in the field and maintaining and inspecting these things. Inspection, obviously, maintenance crews. Engineering department, when you get these maintenance plans, an engineer should probably look at them to be able to say, if this BMP is right for the area, or if the maintenance plan they have proposed will actually make sure things are kept up and running. Planning department, this one can kind of come as a surprise to some people, but really planning is kind of your first line of defense against the developers. They see the plans first, they talk to the developers first. So if the developer is going to find out that they need to install a BMP, or that they're going to have to maintain and inspect this, it's better that they find out at the beginning. So we put planning up there because we want to inform developers and engineers as early as possible. And then record keeping. This is going to result in quite a bit of paperwork and quite a bit of record keeping. So that's something that if TCEQ ever knocks on your door and says, hey, I want to see the past 5 years of your inspection reports, it's something you want to have available. So issues to consider. When we started thinking about what should make up a maintenance and inspection plan, or the maintenance and inspection ordinance for a city, we started thinking of questions they might have or areas where a city might differ on, and we came up with these 8 things. The first one, private versus public ownership. Who's going to be the controlling party of these BMPs? Construction inspections. How are we going to make sure they go in right so that maintenance will be as little as possible? If something's constructed wrong, obviously that's going to have effect on how often it has to be maintained. Operations and maintenance, that's just kind of the yearly, or as large rain events occur, going out there and making sure things are working correctly. Waste management, that's one I'll talk about. We didn't find much information on, but that kind of covers, these BMPs are meant to take out metals and toxins and bacteria and not pleasant things. So when it's time to remove the soil or kind of change out your filter media, what do you do with that? It's not something that you necessarily want to just put in another space or throw away like you would everything else. Inspection of stormwater controls, that's more of going out there, making sure maintenance is being performed, making sure these things are running correctly. And then whenever you have anything that might result in a notification or citation to an owner or developer, you're going to have methods for appeals, variances, and enforcement. Because without enforcement, without teeth to it, it's just not going to get done. They're not going to do anything about it. So when we looked at all those 8 different issues to consider, then we wanted to kind of spread out and see what were cities across America doing about these issues. So we looked at 10 different jurisdictions up there and tried to get it spread out across the United States as we could. Obviously, this is still something that not a whole lot of cities are doing. And And even ones that are doing it, and in some cases doing it well, don't have really the maintenance and inspection ordinance language that we would expect them to have to keep this going. So, the places we looked at, obviously Portland and Seattle, they always come up when you're talking about kind of these advanced water quality issues. Irvine, California, Denver, then we have a couple in North Carolina properties up there in Connecticut. And then we did, for Texas, we did find 3, Austin and Houston had quite a bit of language on operation and maintenance, and then Brazoria County as well, just south of Houston. So the first issue, private versus public ownership. And I'm going to go through each one of these. We'll show the different options that we saw cities taking, and then we'll show you a table of which cities were doing what. So with private versus public ownership, the first one was pretty obvious. For private ownership, cities pretty much just said, if you own this BMP, then you are going to be responsible for maintenance. Pretty much every city had that in there as an option. But then for public, it gets a little bit trickier and the language varies a little bit more. The second one there says, if the facility is located in a residential area without an HOA, the city will take ownership. So they just come straight out and say, most residential areas, the city will be responsible for maintenance and inspection. Number 3, if the facility receives runoff from a public right-of-way, then it's owned and maintained by the city. So that's anything receiving off of streets or roads, any city-owned property. That can be quite a few of them. Number 4, a developer may request the city maintain a facility. If approved, the developer would have to contribute to stormwater maintenance fund the sum of money equal to the estimated cost of 10 to 20 years of maintenance. This one was kind of interesting. I thought it was pretty creative. They just come out and say, hey, if you know that you're not going to be able to maintain this, or if you don't think you're going to be able to maintain it, then just contribute to our stormwater fund and we'll take care of it. Number 5, facilities that will be under city maintenance must go through a 2-year warranty period after construction with 4 inspections during that 2-year period and must pass all inspections. This one was also kind of interesting. It gives a way of, having a private entity kind of, donate that facility to the city, but the city wants to make sure it's well maintained and, already up and running, and there's no problems due to construction or anything like that, and that maintenance in the future will be fairly easy. Yeah.
Before,
yes.
that in addition to the regular fee that they pay, that most cities pay for.
Yeah, that was in addition to the regular stormwater fund fee. And you would have to, this requires a little bit more work. You would have to develop a kind of a rating of, depending on the BMP, what you expect the cost of maintenance to be, and then, what kind of percentage you want to put on inflation for those for 10 to 20 years. But yeah, that could be a decent sum of money.
So this is a compilation of things that you found in those 10 different...
Right, this is a compilation. So out of all those 10 different manuals, these are all the options that came out of that. So, because we do see in a lot of cases, ordinances kind of borrow language from each other, and under a few of these, it was kind of the exact same thing, and you could tell that they were referencing each other. And then under here, you see which cities were doing what. That might be kind of small up there, but also as we go throughout these, you'll see a lot of cities do more than one option. Sometimes it takes more than one of these to make a full ordinance if you want to cover all your bases. But everybody obviously picked the private control. If it's privately owned, then it's privately maintained. Austin had that number 2, where if it was in an HOA or in a residential area without an HOA, the city would take care of it. Houston was actually the one with the stormwater fund. So we thought that was pretty interesting. And then a couple people also mentioned the receiving right-of-way. The next one, construction inspections. So how to inspect these BMPs as they're being constructed to make sure that maintenance will be easier in the future. The first one, use standard construction inspections procedures. A bunch of them just didn't have any detailed, this is specifically what you do for BMPs when they're being constructed. The second one, provide specific minimum inspection requirements within the water quality ordinance. There was a couple, one in particular, Seymour, Connecticut. They actually went through and listed out 5 different BMPs and said at which state or at what stages during construction somebody should be out there making sure it's going as planned. So we thought that was a pretty positive thing to put in your ordinance. It seemed to go really well. The next one, require periodic inspections during construction at times specified, ranging from every 14 days to once during the rainy season. This one, I think it works probably pretty well with temporary controls. As far as BMPs, with our experience, is these things get built really fast. We had a site where we were putting in bioretention ponds. There was, I think, probably 6 or 7 bioretention ponds. They got put in a day. So if you have somebody going out there once every 14 days, you're probably going to miss that. We definitely prefer the, having a list of, bulleted points of what stages in the construction process you want somebody out there checking on these things. So most people just use their standard construction inspection procedures. That's obviously the easiest route to go. And then the 2 that had the specific minimum inspection requirements were Seymour and I think that says Charlotte. And then the rest of them just kind of gave the general range of go out there, every 14 days or during the rainy season to make sure they're working correctly.
It's interesting that Charlotte is under both of those.
Yeah. Yeah, and it could be that maybe for these it's just for temporary controls, but it could be, if you are expecting a really long construction that you want, somebody out there periodically as well. A lot of times, for things for the once every 14 days, good things to check there are that, you're not draining anything to those BMPs, if they're being constructed until all that's developed and done, because you don't want, they're not meant to be your construction BMPs. They're not meant to take in all the silts and fine particles and stuff that could be running off of your construction site. Their purpose is for once everything is built and once everything is in place to be treating that water quality. So going there and making sure that they're not draining parts of the site that shouldn't be draining to the permanent BMPs would be a good idea.
The last time they had any construction?
No, some of them just didn't specify. And a lot of times we think it's more of an issue of them just not thinking about it or being aware of that being an issue. So we don't think omission is, just letting them do whatever they want. And they could have, a lot of times what we find in cities is that they have their own requirements that they don't necessarily write down or put in an ordinance. It's just kind of a known throughout the staff, this is how things go. We do find that, the more you can write down, the more detail you can get into, the better, the less confusion. As long as, developers and engineers and owners know what they're getting into, they're usually a lot happier and a lot more willing to work with you.